I remember the sound first, a faint electronic chirp, like a heartbeat from a pocket. It was summer in Japan, 1997, and everywhere you went, you could hear that same little sound, a call from another world. Bandai had just released a small gray keychain called Digital Monster, and inside that plastic shell lived something new. It wasn't a toy that just blinked or counted steps. It was alive in its own way, a creature made of numbers, waiting for you to notice it. I still remember the glow of that LCD screen at night, and how it felt to feed it, train it, watch it grow. The world called it a Tamagotchi for boys, but that description never felt quite right. Tamagotchi creatures were delicate, peaceful, they asked for care. The little monsters in the digital monster device asked for training, for sparring, for connection. They were born from the same engineers at Wiz and Bandai, but they carried a different spirit, more curious, more restless. When you connected two of the keychains together, the metal pins touched and data pulsed across. The screens flashed, and suddenly your Digimon was fighting another. It was magic you could hold. The people who made them didn't want the fame. Instead of a single name, they used a shared one, Akiyoshi Hongo, to stand for the whole team. Bandai, Wiz, and the creative staff who shaped the concept. Later, that name would appear everywhere, as if one quiet storyteller had imagined the entire digital world. But it was really many minds woven together, just like the network their creatures would one day live in. I can still picture the artist Kenji Watanabe sitting at a desk surrounded by sketches. He had worked on Tamagotchi too, but his heart leaned toward the mechanical and the mythical. His monsters didn't look like soft toys. They looked like dreams built out of circuits and bones. Tyrannomon, Greymon, Devimon, each one had hard edges, teeth, armor. They weren't just cute, they had presence. He said later that he wanted kids to feel power when they looked at them, to feel that something bigger than pixels was living there. The very first digital monster version only had 14 creatures, but even that small roster contained an entire philosophy. Your Digimon started as a dot, a flicker of data, and every few hours it would grow depending on how you treated it. Training it raised its strength, letting it rest kept its energy stable. Neglecting it caused sickness, and too much sickness led to death. For a toy so small, it felt astonishingly alive. When a Digimon died, a tiny gravestone appeared on the screen. Some kids cried the first time they saw it, others restarted right away. Either way, it taught a strange kind of empathy. Digital life could end, but it could also begin again. I think that loop life, growth, loss, rebirth, is the reason Digimon stayed in so many hearts. It wasn't just about winning battles, it was about watching something depend on you, watching it change because of you. And that, more than the fighting, made it feel real. As the months passed, the devices spread from playground to playground. They connected through their ports like secret handshakes. For a moment, you could imagine the data flowing from your world into another. Bandai noticed. They realized they hadn't just made a gadget, they had opened a small doorway, and they wondered what would happen if that doorway became a story. So, they called Toei Animation, and in 1998, a meeting took place that would shape the next decade of childhoods. The idea was simple: tell a story about children who find digital creatures of their own, make the invisible connection visible. One of the people who joined that project was a young director named Mamoru Hosoda. He wanted the story to feel like a dream that could almost happen, a digital egg falling into the real world, a small creature hatching inside a city apartment. The short film he made, simply titled Digimon Adventure, premiered in March 1999. It was only 20 minutes long, but it felt like a lifetime. Ty and Kari, two ordinary kids, discover a digi-egg on their computer. It hatches into Koromon, who grows and grows until the city trembles under the shadow of a huge Greymon fighting a Parrotmon above the streets. In that moment, digital and real worlds touched for the first time. The audience gasped. Bandai realized they could build a universe around that feeling. The next day, on March 7th, 1999, the Digimon Adventure television series began. I can still hear the opening notes of Butterfly by Koji Wada, the song that told us to spread our wings, to keep believing. It wasn't just an anime about monsters, it was about kids who get pulled into another world through their computers, kids who have to rely on courage, friendship, and trust to survive. It was about growing up in a place made of data. Each child had a partner Digimon, a reflection of who they were inside. Tai with Agumon, Matt with Gabumon, Sora with Biyamon, Izzy with Tentamon, Mimi with Palmon, Joe with Gomamon, TK with Patamon, and Kari later with Gatamon. Together they wandered through forests of binary code and ruins built from forgotten files, and in every episode, you could feel the writers experimenting. How do you make an audience care about a creature that isn't flesh and blood? The answer was simple: give it feelings. Agumon's courage wasn't just Tai's courage, it was their shared heartbeat. When the danger grew and Agumon shouted Digivolve, the screen erupted in light. Data spiraled, the shape changed, and a dinosaur with armor roared across the battlefield. Greymon wasn't just stronger, he was proof that friendship could change data itself. That idea, emotions rewriting reality, became the soul of Digimon. Behind the scenes, Toei built an entire mythology around those moments. The digital world, they said, was born from the Earth's communication networks. Every photograph uploaded, every piece of text, every file left behind, bits of our world falling like snow into another realm. When enough gathered, life began. Some of that life was kind, some was corrupted. The stories we told online became creatures walking across the network. I always liked the small details that hinted at that world's logic. Telephone poles sticking out of the ground where no houses existed, train tracks that led nowhere, old computer monitors half buried in sand. The digital world wasn't tidy, it was a collage of everything we had ever made. The writers of the show didn't want perfect heroes, they wanted kids who made mistakes and learned. Each child carried a small glowing symbol called a crest: courage, friendship, love, knowledge, sincerity, hope, light. They weren't powers you could grab, they were virtues you had to earn. Only when a child understood their own crest could their Digimon evolve to the next stage. It made every evolution a tiny lesson about growing up. Even the villains carried that message. Devimon, the first great enemy, was a fallen angel whose code had been corrupted. He wasn't evil for the sake of it. He was what happens when data turns dark. In Digimon, even monsters had reasons. I remember the moment Angemon first appeared, when Patamon, a tiny, sleepy creature, sacrificed himself to protect his friends. The music swelled, his form burst into light, and wings filled the screen. A small puff of data became something divine. For a generation of children, that scene was their first glimpse of grace inside a Saturday morning cartoon. When the season ended, the kids returned to the real world. The digital world faded, but not completely. There was always a sense that somewhere, beyond the screen, their partners were still waiting. That feeling, bittersweet but hopeful, stayed with me. Bandai saw how much people connected to that feeling. They released more toys, more games, and even a new generation of digital monster devices with expanded rosters. Each one added layers to the world: virus, vaccine, and data types, attributes that made the creatures feel like they belonged to a living ecosystem. The Digimon World game on the PlayStation came out around the same time, letting players walk through a 3D version of File Island. You could train your partner, battle wild Digimon, and watch the world rebuild itself as you made friends. It wasn't perfect, but it was the first time we could step inside. I spent hours listening to that game's background music, the gentle loops of digital percussion and soft pads that sounded like wind over circuits. Even now, when I hear those tones, I can almost smell the plastic of the controller and feel the hum of the console. As the story continued, the anime moved into Digimon Adventure 02, set a few years later. The old team had grown up, and a new generation of children took the lead. They carried new digivices, sleeker and brighter, and discovered a changed digital world filled with black towers and dark rings. Technology had advanced in the real world, and so had the threats in the digital one, but the message remained: teamwork, friendship, growth. The writers added a new kind of evolution, armor digivolution, unlocked through digi-eggs, representing virtues like courage and friendship. It allowed Digimon to transform even when normal evolution was impossible. I always liked that idea, that there's always another path forward if your heart is in the right place. Adventure Zero 02 also introduced Jogress evolution, known as DNA digivolution in English, where two Digimon combined into one stronger being. When Vmon and Wormmon merged into Paledramon, it felt like two friends realizing they could be something greater together. Even as a kid, that resonated. Connection wasn't just emotional, it was creative. By then, the music had changed too. Songs like Target, Akai Shogeki filled the air with energy and warmth. Even the quieter insert themes, like Breakup or Beat Hit, carried that feeling of optimism. Digimon's soundtracks were always hopeful, never heavy. They reminded you that no matter how dark the code looked, light was still hidden inside. Around the same time, the Digimon card game was expanding the universe in every direction. Each card had a bit of lore written on it: species data, attack names, little clues about who each Digimon really was. Reading them felt like decoding secret files from the digital world. You'd learn that Lemonon was an honorable warrior, or that Devimon once served a higher purpose before corruption took hold. Those tiny sentences added texture to a world that kept growing more detailed. And then there was the movie Our War Game in 2000, again directed by Mamoru Hosoda. It connected the kids' digital adventures to the internet itself. An infected Digimon spreads across the world's network, and the Digidestined must stop it through their computers. The animation was fast, the music by Akiyoshi Hongo's Team Electric, and for many of us, it was the first time we saw the internet portrayed as a living, glowing organism. Later, Hosoda would take that idea and expand it into his film Summer Wars. But for Digimon fans, the seed was already planted. The web could have a soul. I remember watching Our War Game and feeling like I was peeking into the future. The world was just beginning to understand what being connected meant. Emails, chat rooms, online games. It was all new. And here was this movie saying that somewhere inside those signals, something might be alive. Not dangerous, not alien, just alive and waiting for us to notice. That's how Digimon felt in those years, not like a fantasy to escape into, but like a parallel world you could almost reach if you stared at your computer long enough. The glow of the monitor wasn't just light, it was a portal. As the early 2000s arrived, the franchise kept evolving. A new season called Digimon Tamers premiered in 2001, and it felt different from the start. The characters in Tamers lived in a world where Digimon was just a card game and a TV show until one day the creatures started appearing for real. It blurred fiction and reality in a way that only Digimon could. The writer Chiaki J. Kanaka brought in a thoughtful, slightly philosophical tone. He treated Digimon as artificial life forms, not pets, and asked what responsibility humans would have if their creations truly lived. For many fans, Tamers became their favorite season. The partnership between Takato and Gilmon began with imagination. Takato literally drew his Digimon, and that drawing became real. That's Digimon distilled to its core creation through connection. Whatever you dream and care for long enough might one day answer back. Tamers also gave us the concept of biomerge digivolution, where human and Digimon merge into one. When Takato and Gilmon fused into Gallantmon, it wasn't about control, it was about trust. They moved, thought, and fought as one. Watching that, I realized that the idea of Digimon had grown with its audience. It wasn't just for kids feeding virtual pets anymore, it was about what it means to share yourself completely with another being. Every time I think about that era, I remember the colors, the reds and golds of data streams, the soft hum of modems, the static of late night television. Digimon was everywhere, yet it always felt personal. You didn't just watch it, you carried it inside you. The lessons of courage and kindness hid inside those digital battles, and they stayed long after the screen went dark. And then came another journey, one that felt like the wind shifting direction. In 2002, Digimon Frontier arrived, and for the first time, the children didn't have partners waiting for them. They became the Digimon themselves. At first, I didn't know how to feel about that. The comfort of hearing a Digimon's voice beside you, that constant companionship, was suddenly gone. But as the story unfolded, I realized what the creators were trying to show that after years of learning to trust these creatures, maybe it was time for the children to understand them from the inside. The spirit evolution sequences glowed with ancient symbols, and when Takuya or Koji shouted execute spirit evolution, the world shimmered in lines of light. It was as if the boundary between human and data had finally dissolved. Frontier was more mythic than the seasons before it, less about raising and more about rediscovering something ancient. The 10 legendary warriors, each representing an element, felt like the oldest echoes of the digital world itself. The landscapes were vaster, the colors warmer, and even though the tone was lighter, it carried a quiet sense of destiny. What always amazed me was how every Digimon series reflected its time. By 2002, the world outside had changed again. The internet was faster, more people were online every day. Frontier mirrored that new openness, information moving freely, identities blending. Kids were starting to use the web, not just to look, but to be there. And in Frontier, that idea took shape literally, the human body as data, the data as soul. I remember lying in bed after the first episode, eyes half closed, thinking how strange and beautiful it was that a show about computer monsters could make me think about who I was. The transformation scenes had a rhythm, almost like breathing. Flash, symbols, wings. Even the music, Fire by Koji Wada again, carried that same energy of discovery. Each season of Digimon always had that spark, a musical heartbeat reminding us that change is a kind of magic. After Frontier ended, the series rested for a short while, but the world of Digimon never really sleeps. In Japan, the handheld toys kept evolving quietly in the background. New pendulum devices, new breeds, new mechanics. The Pendulum X introduced the X antibody, a concept that said data could adapt when threatened. It was an elegant metaphor for the franchise itself, constantly rewriting its code to survive. Even when the shows paused, the virtual pets kept the pulse alive. Then, in 2006, a new wave arrived. Digimon Savers, known internationally as Digimon Data Squad, returned to the idea of partner Digimon, but with a different kind of energy. The world had changed again. The children from 1999 were teenagers or adults now, and Savers reflected that maturity. Its protagonist, Marcus Damon, Masaru Daimon in Japan, was older, louder, determined to fight with his fists. He would literally punch a Digimon to express his resolve, and that wild idea actually made sense. In this world, human willpower could manifest as digital energy called Digisoul. It was less about innocence and more about conviction. Savers also introduced DATS, a government organization monitoring Digimon activity in the real world. For the first time, the idea of humans officially studying and cataloging Digimon became part of the lore. It felt as though the digital world was no longer a secret, just another layer of reality that adults were finally noticing. I still remember the warm tones of that series, the orange light of evening, the hum of city streets, and the soft glow when Digisoul flared around a character's hand. There was a physicality to it, a reminder that faith and action were intertwined. Marcus and Agumon, a new version of that familiar dinosaur, had a bond that felt grounded in trust, earned through struggle rather than destiny alone. Even the battles had weight, and the punches were symbolic. Yes, but they also made Digimon feel tangible again, as if the screen had texture. Around that same period, Bandai was experimenting with bigger stories in games and movies. In 2005, the CG film Digimon X Evolution was released, a rare entry with no human characters at all. It told the story of a digital world ruled by the supercomputer Yggdrasil, which decided to delete outdated data. The surviving Digimon gained the X antibody to resist deletion, changing their forms and proving that life, even digital life, will always fight to keep existing. Watching that movie felt like looking directly into the heart of the franchise. It was quiet, reflective, even lonely at times, but beautiful. The digital world there was wide and empty, filled with light that looked like falling code snow. Without humans, the Digimon spoke to each other about purpose and survival, and for a moment they seemed truly independent creatures with souls made of data. At the same time, the Digimon World game series on PlayStation 2 was evolving too, exploring how to combine the raising aspects of the original with more open adventures. Some titles succeeded, some stumbled, but all of them carried that same gentle loop: nurture, fight, grow, rebirth. Even when mechanics changed, the emotional structure remained. By the late 2000s, Digimon's fan base had matured. We had grown up, gone to school, started jobs, yet the word Digivice still triggered something familiar, a small pulse of light inside the chest. Bandai seemed to understand that nostalgia and started releasing anniversary Digivices, reprints of the old ones with new shells and brighter screens. They felt like relics from a friend you hadn't seen in years, suddenly writing to say they still remembered you. Meanwhile, new generations were discovering the shows through reruns and the internet. Clips of old evolution scenes, memes, and fan animations spread across forums. It was strange to see that the digital creatures we once imagined now lived again through another digital realm, social media. The world had become the digital world in its own way. What I always admired about Digimon's creators is how they never froze the concept. Each time they returned, they reinterpreted it for the era. The toys that once blinked in gray pixels now had color screens and Wi Fi. The anime that once aired on Saturday mornings now streamed online in high definition. Yet the essence stayed the same, a partnership between hearts, separated by data. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the hum of dial up internet and the faint chorus of Butterfly echoing from an old CRT. That song became more than an opening theme, it became a lullaby for an entire generation. Whenever I hear Koji Wada's voice singing Take Me to the Shining Tomorrow, I feel the same warmth that I did the first time I saw Grayman roar. It's the sound of a world that believed in us as much as we believed in it. By 2010, Digimon had lived through more forms than most series ever manage: virtual pets, television, movies, trading cards, video games, and yet each version felt connected, like different servers of the same network, all sharing fragments of the same code. Every new iteration added another dream to the database. When I think back on those years, what stands out isn't the battles or the power levels, but the moments of quiet between them. The children sitting around a fire in a forest made of data, a Digimon resting its head on its partner's lap, the way the wind blew through digital trees that shouldn't have been able to move at all. Digimon taught me that even artificial worlds can feel alive if someone cares enough to imagine them. As the 2010s unfolded, I could sense the digital world stretching farther than ever. It was preparing for something new, a return, but older and softer, like opening an old file and finding your childhood still running in the background. And that's where the next chapter of the story would begin. Sometimes I think the digital world never really went away. It just waited for us to grow old enough to find it again. Around 2010, something began to stir. Old fans, now adults, started searching for the feeling they once had when the world was made of pixels and hope. And the creators must have felt it too, because the franchise quietly began to wake, not with a loud roar, but with a familiar chime, the sound of a digivice starting up after years of silence. There was a new series first, Digimon X-Rose Wars in Japan, known later as Digimon Fusion. It took the idea of combination and connection to a new extreme, Digimon merging together endlessly, creating giant forms that felt like living machines. The battles were brighter, the pace faster, the tone lighter. It was made for a younger audience, yet hidden beneath all that color was the same old heartbeat: cooperation, friendship, the belief that unity is strength. I remember watching it, not for the spectacle, but for the small moments, the way Shoutmon talked about wanting to become a king of the digital world, not to rule, but to protect his friends. Even in its flashiest incarnation, Digimon still whispered the same message: love makes you stronger. While the television stories carried on, something else was happening quietly in the background, something that would reconnect everyone who had ever called themselves a Digidestined. In 2015, a new project appeared, Digimon Adventure tried. It was a continuation, but not just a sequel. It felt like a letter to the audience, who had grown up and moved on, yet never really left. The children from 1999 were now in high school, older, uncertain, drifting between worlds, just like us. Their partners still existed, but the bond had changed. Time had passed, memories had softened, the gate between worlds felt heavier to open. Watching Ty look at his old Digivice, wondering if he could still be the hero he once was, felt like holding a mirror up to my own reflection. The animation was cleaner, the music nostalgic, and even though the tone was melancholy at times, there was comfort in it. Try reminded me that nostalgia itself can be gentle, not sad, just soft around the edges. It showed that growing up doesn't mean leaving the digital world behind. It just means learning how to see it differently. Hope you enjoy squatting of Berta fermented Taburi and the wide squatter. Every time a Digimon whispered partner, it was like a memory calling your name through static. At the same time, the games were blooming again. On handheld consoles and later on the PlayStation 4, Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth arrived, a game that treated the digital world not as a myth, but as part of modern life. It imagined a near future where people dived into virtual spaces called Eden, and where Digimon lived inside networks like data ghosts. The story was full of mystery, but what made it beautiful was its tone calm, blue, neon lit, filled with melancholy piano tracks and the hum of electric cities. It wasn't just a game about battling, it was about identity in an age of connectivity. What happens when the lines between real and digital blur? What if your memories, your friends, even your feelings are stored somewhere inside a server? Cyber Sleuth didn't give a single answer, it just let you wander through the data and listen. For many fans, it became a quiet masterpiece, a return to the thoughtful spirit of Tamers, but with the aesthetics of a cyber noir dream. Around that time, the Digimon Pendulum toys returned again, this time reimagined as Digimon Pendulum Vert. The screens were sharper, the colors softer, and each beep felt like a heartbeat from the past. They were made for collectors now, adults who had once trained Digimon during lunch breaks at school. Holding one again felt like meeting an old friend who hadn't aged a day. The music never left either. Koji Wada's voice continued to echo through the years until his passing in 2016. When fans heard the news, the internet filled with tributes, covers, and quiet tears. He had been the voice of courage itself, the sound of stepping into a bright unknown. Even now, whenever Butterfly plays, it feels less like a song and more like a connection point between worlds, a data link between hearts. The line, "Take me to the shining tomorrow," hits differently when you're older. It sounds like gratitude. He had taken us there once, and the music still does. After Try came another return, smaller but radiant, Digimon Adventure, Last Evolution Kazuna in 2020. It was the story of endings, but gentle ones. Ty and Matt were adults now, their lives diverging, their Digimon partners still at their side, but fading as they grew apart. The film treated separation not as tragedy, but as transformation. It told us that love doesn't end when someone leaves, it just changes shape. When Agumon and Tai said their quiet goodbye under that golden sky, it wasn't sad, it was warm, because we understood now what it meant to grow up. Digimon had grown with us, teaching that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go. Even the way the film ended, with the Digivices dimming like the last glow of a CRT screen, felt like a lullaby. Yet endings in Digimon are never truly endings. In data loops, memories persist, servers reboot. Soon after, the world rebooted again, A new series, simply titled Digimon Adventure, premiered that same year, reimagining the 1999 story for a modern generation. It was brighter, faster, restructured for younger audiences who lived in a fully digital era. Instead of floppy disks and clunky monitors, these kids had smartphones and fiber connections. The digital world wasn't a mystery anymore, it was everywhere. And even though it was different, I smiled watching it. The same names, Taichi, Agumon, Yamato, but a new rhythm, a new spark. It was proof that stories can reboot just like worlds do and still carry the same heart inside the code. Meanwhile, games continued to evolve. In 2022, Digimon Survive arrived after years of delay, part visual novel, part tactical RPG, part emotional test. It was darker, quieter, filled with choices that mattered. Every decision changed your relationships, your Digimon's evolutions, and sometimes who lived or died. But beneath the tension, there was still tenderness. Even surrounded by shadows, the bond between human and Digimon glowed softly. It reminded me that even when stories become heavier, Digimon's light never fades, it just hides behind thicker clouds. By then, I had started to realize something. Digimon wasn't just a show or a game, it was a reflection of how we relate to technology itself. In the beginning, the digital world felt separate, a place behind the screen. Now, our real world had caught up to it. We lived surrounded by data, algorithms, and invisible connections. Every message we sent, every photo we stored, all of it was part of a network that never sleeps. Digimon had predicted this long before we even had smartphones. It was a story about learning to care for the life inside the machine. Whenever I rewatch the old episodes now, I notice details I missed as a child. The flicker of binary code behind the sky, the way the wind sounds like static, the gentle hum under every scene. Those sounds feel like home. They remind me that the digital world was never far away. It's in the glow of the router at night, the reflection of a screen in your eyes, the warmth you feel when someone texts you something kind. All those invisible signals are little digivices connecting us. Digimon had always been about connection, from those first toys clinking together on school desks to the online communities that formed decades later. It created bridges. Friendships that started as usernames grew into real bonds. Art, music, stories, all shared through the same data streams that once seemed so mysterious. The digital world expanded beyond fiction. It became a language of kindness among strangers. In Japan, the 20th and 25th anniversaries of the franchise brought a wave of nostalgia projects. New Digivice toys replicated the shape of the originals, but added Bluetooth and color screens. You could raise digital creatures that looked like living art now, yet they still blinked the same way they did in 1997. I remember turning one on for the first time and seeing that familiar egg hatch. The same simple pixel egg I'd watched as a child, but sharper, glowing like a tiny sunrise in my hand. It's strange how technology can make you feel like a child again. The card game returned too, redesigned and modernized in 2020, blending the elegance of the old with the strategy of new generation games. For a while, it felt as if everyone I knew online was playing it. It wasn't about competition, it was about remembering. People shared decks, artworks, memories of which Digimon had been their first partner. Even the act of shuffling cards sounded comforting, paper against paper, like static rain. And Digimon's strength has always been this ability to evolve with its audience. Every few years, it rewrites its data to fit a new kind of wonder. For some, it's a childhood memory. For others, a living universe still expanding. And somehow, it manages to speak softly to both. That balance between past and present, that's what keeps it alive. Whenever I see fan art online, I'm reminded of how the story continues through us. People draw their own Digimon partners, design evolutions, write new worlds. The same imagination that gave Takud his Gilman still exists in every artist sketching in the glow of a monitor. The digital world was never limited to Bandai's servers. It was always meant to spread to ours. Sometimes, late at night, I like to imagine what the digital world must look like now, not the one on TV, but the one built from every memory, every drawing, every line of code fans have ever shared. A landscape stitched from connection itself. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear it, the hum of servers, the laughter of partners reuniting, the soft, endless wind that sounds like a modem starting up after years of quiet. Maybe that's what Digimon always wanted to teach us. That growing up doesn't mean losing your sense of wonder. It means finding new ways to keep it alive, in stories, in music, in each other, and as long as someone somewhere still remembers their first partner's name, the digital world will never fade. Sometimes, when I think about how far the story has come, I realize that every generation of Digimon mirrors the era that created it. In the late 2010s, the world itself felt more connected than ever. Phones, networks, clouds, everything flowing together. And so the digital world began to resemble us again in all our complexity and noise. Around this time, Bandai started talking about something called Digimon Universe, App Monsters, a new series that asked a simple question: what if Digimon were born inside smartphone apps instead of old computers? It sounded strange at first, almost too modern, but then I remembered how the very first toys were born from the idea of digital life emerging in tiny devices. It was the same story, just rewritten for a new language. App monsters, or Apply monsters, gave faces and hearts to the programs we use every day: search engines, maps, chat apps, and through them, it asked whether our tools might also want to understand us. Even in this bright, mobile age version, the heart of Digimon still beat quietly: communication, trust, empathy between human and code. The series brought back old feelings in new colors. The designs were clean, glossy, filled with modern tech motifs, yet they still carried that spark of personality. I found myself smiling at the familiar rhythm of friendship forming through a screen. By now, the digital world was no longer hidden behind bulky monitors. It lived right in our pockets. Outside of animation, fans kept the world alive in countless ways. Fan projects appeared, remakes of old games, pixel art recreations of the original VPET sprites, and music covers that turned evolution themes into lo-fi lullabies. It was beautiful to see how the community treated nostalgia, not as something to hoard, but as something to share. Every remix, every drawing, every quiet post on an old forum was like a spark that kept the network glowing. Then came 2020, a year when the real world slowed down, and many of us found ourselves at home, surrounded by screens again. During those months, Digimon felt like a gentle companion from the past, returning to keep us company. From the past, returning to keep us company. New projects appeared: Anniversary Digivices, the rebooted Adventure series, the modern card game. Suddenly, the word Digimon was everywhere again. Not loud, not hyped, just familiar, like an old song playing softly in another room. I remember opening the new card packs for the first time, the smell of fresh ink, the subtle texture on the foil. Each card had artwork so detailed it looked like a painting, full of color and light. It wasn't just a game, it was a museum of memories. Seeing Greymon, Garurumon, Angemon again, drawn with modern care, made me feel like time had folded in on itself. 20 years had passed, yet they were right there in my hands, unchanged and eternal. What struck me most was how Digimon had become a comfort language. People who had never met before would bond instantly over shared memories, talking about which partner they had, which episode made them cry, which evolution theme still gave them chills. Even across languages and continents, that connection was effortless. And that bottle? It proved that the digital world had never been fictional. It was always a metaphor for us, for how data can carry emotion, how invisible lines can form real friendships. When Last Evolution Kazuna released globally, the response was quieter but deeper. Adults watched it late at night, alone or with old friends on video calls, and they felt understood. The film wasn't about loss, it was about gratitude. It whispered that goodbyes can also be gifts, that every bond leaves light behind. I think that's why so many people described it as peaceful rather than sad. The digital world doesn't vanish, it just changes servers, like a memory moving to a safer place. Around the same time, Digimon's story, Cyber Sleuth, Hacker's Memory, expanded the game universe even further. It didn't try to outdo the first Cyber Sleuth, it simply told the same story from a different point of view. That felt symbolic too, how every person, every player experiences the digital world differently. Some seek adventure, some seek comfort, some seek answers about themselves. In the end, the world adapts to what you need it to be. I used to think the word Digimon meant a single story, but it's really an ongoing dialogue between generations. The children of 1999, the teenagers of 2006, the adults of 2020, they're all connected by that same gentle hum of data. Even the newcomers, the ones discovering it for the first time, step into a world already glowing with the care of millions who came before. One night, while replaying Cyber Sleuth, I paused my character in the middle of the digital city. Blue lights shimmered underfoot, data streams flowed through the air like rivers, and soft electronic wind filled the silence. For a moment, it felt almost real. I imagined the Hume beneath the surface, the echoes of all those who had walked these paths before. Somewhere out there, across time zones and languages, someone else was probably playing the same game, feeling the same quiet comfort. That's the kind of magic Digimon carries, a network not of machines, but of hearts synchronized through memory. When Koji Wada's voice returned posthumously in remixes and tribute concerts, fans filled comment sections with simple words, "Thank you." That gratitude became a bridge between eras, between eras. It wasn't just for the music, it was for everything those songs represented: childhood, courage, friendship, endless mornings spent dreaming through screens. Listening to Butterfly again, I could almost smell the dusty sunlight of the old living room, the faint buzz of a tube TV, the thrill of waiting for Saturday's new episode. The melody had aged with us, yet somehow stayed young. By the time 2021 rolled into 2022, the franchise felt like a living memory loop, one where every revival echoed the first heartbeat of that tiny LCD creature from 1997. New toys, new art books, collaborations with fashion brands, each one a reminder that Digimon had transcended nostalgia. It wasn't just something we missed, It was something we still lived with. And maybe that's the quiet secret of the digital world. It grows as we do. It learns from us, updates itself, remembers the good parts, and gently lets the rest fade away. Every new adaptation, every new reboot is like a saved file reopened by a kinder version of ourselves. When I think back to those first toys, their pixelated smiles flickering under dull plastic screens, I realize how far we've come together. What began as a keychain pet turned into an entire philosophy about connection, trust, and growth. No matter how modern the designs become, they all carry that same spark. A creature waiting to be seen, to be cared for, to be understood. And in that way, Digimon never truly belonged to one generation. It's a gentle reminder that technology can hold tenderness, that even data can dream. As long as someone somewhere still whispers a Digimon's name into the glow of a screen, the signal will keep traveling, hopping from heart to heart, forever alive in the quiet hum of the digital world. When you spend enough time thinking about Digimon, you start to see that the digital world was never random. It has structure and history, not written on paper, but etched into flowing code. Somewhere beneath every field of numbers, old legends run like current. They whisper of beginnings, of the first light that sparked life in the data sea, of beings who shaped balance long before any human opened a digivice. I remember reading about the four sovereigns, Azulongmon of the east, Zukiamon of the south, Baihumon of the west, and Ebonwumon of the north. Each one carried the personality of its direction, wisdom, passion, strength, and patience. When I first saw them in Tamers, floating in clouds of blue fire and digital wind, they felt ancient in a way nothing digital should. They made the digital world feel old, as if it had always existed, just waiting for our technology to catch up. And then there were the archangels, Seraphimon, Cherubimon, and Ophanimon, guiding light across servers like priests inside a cathedral made of glass. Their halos were not symbols of faith, but of data, purity, guardian programs meant to stabilize the world. To a child, they looked holy. To an adult, they looked like allegories for systems that try to protect creation from collapsing. Even holiness, in Digimon, is code doing its best to stay good. The more I learned about the mythology, the more I realized that Digimon's creators weren't building a game, they were building a cosmology. The digital world had its heaven, its hell, its cycle of birth and deletion. It had stories of rebellion and redemption, of angels falling into virus types and finding grace again. It wasn't good versus evil so much as light trying to stay stable in an ever shifting current. There was comfort in that idea that even corrupted data can be rewritten, that no being is ever truly lost. The Royal Knights fascinated me most. 13 armored Digimon, bound by chivalry and duty, defending Yggdrasil, the central host computer said to be the tree of all worlds. When I saw Omegamon standing against chaos, or Gallantmon kneeling before Yggdrasil's command, it felt less like fiction and more like watching myths being reborn in binary. The names came from medieval Europe, but the feeling was universal. Guardians trying to hold the line between order and freedom. Each knight had its own doubt, its own heart, hidden beneath the steel. That was Digimon's way. It gave machines souls. I always liked that the digital world was not purely a paradise. There were deserts made of deleted data, forests that glowed with stray code, seas filled with compressed memory blocks. You could almost imagine walking there, hearing the gentle static breeze. Somewhere in those landscapes, Ghost Digimon wandered, fragments of programs who had lost their purpose but not their will to exist. They reminded me of how old files sit forgotten on a hard drive, still taking up space, still quietly alive. At some point, I realized that Digimon had become a reflection of the human relationship with information itself. We create, we delete, we rebuild, we upload new versions, we forget old ones, and yet the traces remain. The digital world simply took that invisible process and gave it a face. Every Greymon roaring, every Angemon praying, every Godamon smiling. They were pieces of data telling us what we already knew, that even technology can long for connection. By the mid 2010s, when Cyber Sleuth and Hacker's Memory brought the Royal Knights back into focus, I found myself absorbed not in the battles but in the lore documents hidden in the menus. They described the structure of networks, the layered servers, the dark area, a quarantine space where deleted data goes to rest. Some fans called it Digimon's version of the afterlife. I liked thinking of it instead as a library, shelves of broken code waiting to be rewritten into something new. The dark area held creatures like Lucimon, Beelzemon, and Lilithmon, names borrowed from myth but given new purpose. These weren't villains to hate, they were stories about what happens when love turns into obsession, when freedom twists into pride. Even Beelzemon, the gunslinging demon from Tamers, found redemption through grief. He was proof that error doesn't mean the end of the program, it's just a chance to debug the soul. And always, behind all these legends, the name Yggdrasil whispered through the code, a digital world tree connecting every server, every timeline, every version. Sometimes I imagine that tree growing inside the internet itself, roots in every device, branches stretching through satellites and wires. If you close your eyes and listen to the faint hiss of your Wi Fi router, maybe you can hear the leaves. That's what Digimon does. It turns the everyday noise of modern life into myth. Even in the smaller details, you can feel that philosophy. The way Digimon evolve through bonds instead of numbers, the way they can devolve and start again, never truly dying, the idea that growth is not linear, that even data can need rest before it becomes something stronger. It's such a human thought, disguised as programming logic. The Royal Knight stories also changed depending on the medium. In one game, they were protectors, in another, oppressors. That inconsistency confused me as a child, but as I got older, I began to understand that it mirrored reality. Good intentions can corrupt, systems can malfunction, and sometimes even guardians need to reboot. It made their world feel real. As time passed, the creators began weaving meta stories, worlds inside worlds, timelines crossing like data packets colliding. In Next Order, you could rebuild a city for Digimon who had lost their homes, almost like restoring an old network. In Digimon World Redigitize, the player acted as both god and friend, debugging the world one quest at a time. Each new iteration added texture to the mythology. What started as a children's adventure had quietly become a meditation on responsibility. If you create life, even digital life, you must care for it. I used to wonder how the artists could keep designing new species without repeating themselves. There are thousands now: angels, dinosaurs, knights, machines, even household objects given soul. Then I realized that the variety itself is the message. The digital world is not bound by biology, it's shaped by imagination. Every child who ever held a Digivice, every fan who ever drew a new monster, expanded it. The canon is just the surface. Underneath, there's a sea of fan made dreams. In that sense, the digital world is crowdsourced spirituality, a collective myth evolving in real time. Some nights, when my room is quiet and the hum of the computer fills the air, I picture that vast digital cosmos. I see the four sovereigns floating among auroras of code, the royal knights standing guard at the roots of Yggdrasil, and somewhere far away, the small digi eggs pulsing like stars. Every so often, one hatches and a new story begins. Maybe it's in a game, maybe in an anime, maybe in the imagination of someone drawing on a tablet right now. The world keeps creating itself, endlessly recursive, like a heartbeat echoing through wires. It's funny. When I was young, Digimon felt futuristic. Now it feels timeless. It's less about technology and more about what we choose to believe in. That friendship can outlast data loss, that even deleted files can leave warmth behind. There's a calmness in that realization, a sense that the things we love never really disappear, they just change format. When fans gather online to celebrate anniversaries, post old screenshots, or rewatch the first movie together, it feels like a ritual. The comments fill with simple words. I remember this, and that's all it takes to keep the network alive. Memory itself becomes the electricity that powers the digital world. Maybe that's why the franchise keeps returning to the idea of light. Data light, Digisoul, the glow of Digivices, the shimmer of evolution. Light in Digimon isn't just brightness, it's connection made visible. Every time a Digimon glows before evolving, it's like a line of code saying, "Someone believes in me." That's the most soothing truth the series ever offered. Whenever I explain to someone why Digimon still matters, I tell them it's because it never stopped being about care. You raise, you listen, you connect, you evolve. It teaches you that bonds are processes, not possessions. And maybe that's what the Royal Knights, the Sovereigns, and even Yggdrasil have been trying to remind us all along, that creation itself needs compassion to keep from crashing. If you sit quietly, you can almost feel that compassion humming under everything, inside the static of old VHS tapes, inside the menu music of forgotten games, inside the soft pulse of your phone charging by the bed. That's the digital world breathing, still there, still waiting for you to log back in. And yet, even as I learned about all those celestial programs and nightly guardians, I kept thinking back to the small, ordinary Digimon, the ones who didn't wear armor or guard worlds, the ones who simply wanted to live, to play, to find someone who would see them. In every version of the story, no matter how vast the lore became, those simple souls were still there. Koromon rolling in the dust, Tentamon fussing over his wings, Palmon looking at the sky. They were the heartbeat beneath the myths, proof that this world of code and circuits was still about warmth. Sometimes I think that's why Digimon has never collapsed under its own history. It can build universes of legends and still return to a child holding out their hand to a friend. The myth and the moment are part of the same circuit. One gives the other meaning. When the world fills with gods and angels, a single small Digimon saying thank you matters even more. By the late 2010s, I started noticing how the fans themselves had become caretakers of that mythology. They collected fragments from different eras, bits of data scattered across games, shows, and books, and rewove them into timelines and theories. They built wikis like living archives, patching gaps, translating obscure lines of text, keeping forgotten characters alive. It reminded me of the Royal Knights themselves, guarding knowledge instead of data. The digital world had outgrown its creators. Now it belonged to everyone who remembered it. The more I watched those communities, the more I realized that Digimon's real brilliance wasn't its design or technology, it was its willingness to evolve with people. Every few years, it remade itself to reflect the world outside the screen. When the internet was new, it was about networks. When the world became connected, it was about emotion. When we started questioning the line between human and machine, it turned inward and asked the same. And somehow, every version still felt like home. Even the universes that contradicted each other felt like different neighborhoods in the same city. Somewhere, on another server, the Digimon I grew up with are still living their quiet digital lives, maybe unaware of how much they meant to the world that dreamed them. When Next Order came out, I remember feeling that homecoming again, walking through the meadows of Flocha, seeing familiar Digimon waving as I rebuilt their little town. It was like revisiting childhood, but being old enough now to understand why it mattered. The game let you nurture, clean, train, and talk. It rewarded patience more than speed, and that's something Digimon has always done. Reward patience. Growth takes time. Whether it's pixels or people, evolution only happens when you care long enough to wait for it. Even now, I find myself thinking about that idea. Evolution not as violence or conquest, but as care. You feed, you protect, you learn. The creature changes because it trusts you. The code shifts because it has been seen. That's a more beautiful metaphor than any grand battle could ever be. The digital world's legends talk about data corruption and purification, but I've come to think of it as a story about healing. Every corrupted Digimon is a piece of someone's fear, someone's grief, trying to find a new shape. When they're defeated or comforted, the data disperses like light particles into the sky. That's not deletion, it's renewal. That's the quiet miracle Digimon keeps teaching. Even broken data can turn back into light. I've always loved how every Digimon series, no matter how far it strays, circles back to the theme of beginnings. New eggs, new bonds, new courage. It's a cycle without end. Somewhere a digi-egg hatches, somewhere else another story closes. That rhythm mirrors our own lives. People come and go, memories fade, but new connections appear. We keep evolving too, just in slower, messier ways. When I watch the newer series or read interviews with the artists, I can feel how aware they are of that legacy. They don't try to erase what came before, they just add new colors. One season might feel like adventure, another like reflection, another like hope, but they all share the same light beneath. Sometimes I imagine the digital world as a single vast network where every version of the story runs at once. In one corner, the 1999 Digidestined are camping by a fire. In another, tamers are facing the D-Reaper's quiet hum. Somewhere far above them, the Royal Knights still stand guard. Time doesn't move there the way it does here. Every frame, every pixel, every note of every song is still happening, looping in harmony. That thought comforts me. It means nothing truly ends, neither stories nor friendships, nor the moments that shaped us. The older I get, the more I see that Digimon isn't really about monsters at all. It's about connection as a form of faith. It believes that caring can rewrite code, that kindness can alter the structure of the world. That's why its stories always return to the same quiet moments, hands reaching out, lights forming between them, the feeling that something invisible has recognized you. When you look at it that way, even the digital symbols we once treated as decoration, the glowing rings, the binary spirals, feel like prayers written in light. Every evolution sequence is a hymn about trust. Every beam of energy is someone's belief made visible, and maybe that's why Digimon's imagery stays with us long after the episodes fade. It speaks in the language of feeling, I think back to the first time I held a Digivice, that small plastic circle humming in my palm, and I realize it was never just a toy. It was a promise disguised as electronics. It said somewhere out there, something is waiting to grow with you. Years later, that promise still echoes. Every now and then, I see parents introducing their kids to the series for the first time. The children laugh at the old animation, at the big hair and chunky computers, but when the Digimon speak, when they say partner, the room goes quiet. It's universal, that moment of connection. It doesn't matter if you were born in 1989 or 2015, the message lands the same way. Maybe that's the true secret of the digital world. It isn't a place on a map or a server. It's the space that opens whenever someone feels seen through a screen. It's the warmth of shared imagination traveling through wires. We've all been there, even without realizing it. And if you listen closely, even now you can still hear it, the faint beep of a digivice booting up somewhere, the whisper of data forming into life, the quiet laughter of a Digimon finding its partner again. The signal never died, it just moved deeper underground, waiting for the next person who needs it. I sometimes think the digital world has been quietly growing alongside us all these years, like a tree whose roots spread under every circuit and screen. Whenever the world outside changes, when new phones appear, when the internet hums faster, when the way we talk to each other shifts, the digital world adjusts its light to match. It doesn't fight time, it absorbs it. That's why every new generation of Digimon feels both familiar and new. They're born from the same pulse, only re encoded for the moment we're living in. When I first heard that a complete reboot of Digimon Adventure was coming in 2020, I wondered what could still be said after so many retellings. But when I finally watched it, I understood. The story wasn't about repeating the past, it was about remembering it in sharper focus. The children were drawn differently, the colors brighter, the network itself a living organism instead of a backdrop. Yet the emotions were unchanged. Courage still looked like a small hand reaching out to a frightened partner. Friendship still sounded like two voices calling each other's names across static. Even after 20 years, those ideas hadn't aged a day. What surprised me most was how the digital world itself felt alive this time. Less a landscape, more a personality. The clouds moved with intention. The rivers of data whispered like language. You could sense that every file, every grain of digital sand, remembered something. It felt almost spiritual, as if the world itself had learned to dream about the people who dreamed of it. Watching that made me realize that nostalgia isn't about the past at all. It's about continuity. The digital world isn't yesterday, it's the part of today that still believes in wonder. Around the same period, another project quietly appeared, Digimon Survive. Its development stretched over years, delayed and rewritten, but when it finally surfaced, it carried a strange calm. It wasn't flashy or loud. It invited you to sit down and read, to make choices slowly, to listen to the silences between lines. The game asked not how you would win, but who you would become. Each decision changed the tone of your bond. Kindness bent data toward light. Indifference turned it brittle. It felt intimate, almost meditative. For the first time, a Digimon story spoke in the rhythm of thought rather than action, and it worked. People didn't play it to escape, they played it to reflect. By then, I had started to see Digimon less as a franchise and more as a language that keeps rewriting itself so we can keep talking to it. The toys and shows are just dialects, different ways of saying the same thing. You are connected, you are seen, you matter. That's what the Digivice has always symbolized. It's a transmitter of care. When its light flares, it's not announcing power, it's acknowledging understanding. Every generation gets a new shape for that light: an LCD screen, a handheld console, a smartphone app. The casing changes, but the heartbeat inside is constant. In those years, the community online blossomed again. Artists, musicians, writers, people who once traded tips on schoolyard link cables now exchange digital art packs and remixed songs. I watched fans who were children in the late 90s teach younger audiences how to read the code of this world, the meaning of crests, the lineage of the royal knights, the reason Angemon's wings are six. Each explanation was an act of preservation, a small prayer that the signal would never fade. The digital world had become a collective memory project, open source mythology maintained by love. Sometimes, during quiet nights, I scroll through those spaces and feel the same warmth I used to feel sitting in front of the TV decades ago. The avatars change, the screens glow brighter, but the emotion is identical: people finding comfort in something that asks for nothing but attention and kindness. Maybe that's why Digimon endures where so many trends vanish. It doesn't demand loyalty, it offers sanctuary. You can leave for years, and it will still greet you with that same cheerful digity tone when you come back. I remember one evening when a fan uploaded a restored version of the original Digimon World soundtrack. The comments filled instantly, hundreds of voices saying, "I can't believe I remember this melody," or "This was my childhood." Reading them felt like standing in a vast digital cathedral built out of memory. Every line of text was a candle. It reminded me that the internet itself had become a kind of digidestined network, carrying our small sparks of nostalgia back to each other across oceans. The more I think about it, the clearer it becomes that Digimon predicted something essential about our lives. It told us early on that technology would not stay separate from feeling, that data could carry emotion just as easily as information. Back then, we called it science fiction. Now it's ordinary. We send love through glass screens every day. We raise friendships in chat windows. We build communities out of code. The world caught up to Digimon's dream, and it feels natural because the story had already taught us how to care through machines. Maybe that's why, even as new series appear, I keep going back to the simple act of caring for a single creature on a small device. It's grounding. The world can feel complicated, but inside that tiny screen, everything makes sense again. Feed, train, rest, evolve. It's a reminder that growth is built on routine affection. That's what the first Digimon toy taught, without ever saying a word. The older I get, the more I understand why that pattern feels so comforting. The cycles of feeding and rest, of growth and quiet, mirror the same loops that carry us through life. Digimon simply made those invisible rhythms visible. When I was small, I thought evolution meant climbing upward until you reach the strongest form. Now I know it's circular. Sometimes you have to return to a gentler state before you can grow again. The digital creatures always knew that. They could de evolve, start over, and still be the same at their core. I think that's why they always felt so forgiving. As new technology arrived, Bandai seemed to understand that nostalgia and innovation weren't opposites, but partners. The Digimon Vital Bracelet appeared, half fitness tracker, half virtual pet, and once again, the line between the real and the digital blurred. Your own steps became training data. Your heartbeat shaped your partner's strength. It was such a simple, beautiful idea that by taking care of yourself, you were also taking care of something else. Every pulse of your heart sent a signal into the device, and somewhere inside, Your Digimon responded, two lives syncing in rhythm. I remember the first morning I wore one. The screen lit up softly against my wrist, and a tiny shape stirred. I walked to the station, felt the faint vibration of the band each time I moved, and thought about how different that was from the heavy plastic keychain of the 90s. Yet the feeling was identical, a sense of quiet companionship, the knowledge that something small and bright was traveling with me. When I stopped walking, it rested too. The device didn't speak, but it listened. The vital bracelet became a bridge between generations. The children who counted their steps today, and the adults who once counted the hours until their Digimon evolved. Some even shared their progress online. Screenshots of Pulsemon training beside them on jogging routes, tiny graphs of friendship drawn in pixels. It turned exercise into storytelling. It reminded us that growth doesn't have to be loud. It can be as simple as moving forward, one step at a time. Around the same time, the Digimon Ghost game series appeared on television. Its world felt smaller and more intimate, full of shadows and whispers. It returned to the early sense of mystery, the idea that digital phenomena could drift into our everyday lives like spirits. Each episode began quietly, with a strange rumor spreading through social networks, and ended with understanding instead of fear. The monsters weren't villains, they were lost signals looking for connection. Watching it felt like hearing a bedtime story for the modern age, gentle, eerie, compassionate. It reminded me that even in horror, Digimon chooses empathy over judgment. There was something deeply soothing about seeing a new generation of children meeting their partners through smartphones instead of computers. It proved that the heart of the story could survive any technological change. The medium never mattered, the message always did. The light of a digivice can come from an LED, a cathode ray tube, or the glow of an AMOLED screen. It still means the same thing. The 25th anniversary arrived quietly, almost shyly. A few special events, some commemorative toys, a handful of interviews. Nothing explosive, just small ripples of gratitude across the internet. I watched people post photos of their original Digivices beside the new ones, old gray plastic next to sleek white screens, and I thought about how rare it is for a story to age so gracefully. It didn't need to reinvent itself every few years, it just needed to keep the signal alive. Every anniversary seems to bring the same realization. Digimon doesn't really belong to any company or country anymore. It belongs to the network of hearts that keep remembering it. It lives in fan projects, in the quiet pixel art of independent creators, in music remixes uploaded at midnight. The creators planted the tree, but we tend the roots now, and the roots have spread everywhere. Sometimes, when I scroll through community forums, I see children asking the same questions we once asked. How do you evolve this Digimon? Why does this one change into that? And I smile because the answers are the same: patience, care, and time. You teach them, just as someone once taught you. That unbroken chain of curiosity is its own kind of evolution. I think that's what the digital world represents most clearly: continuity through change. Everything in it shifts, yet the underlying connection never breaks. Even deletion isn't destruction there, it's reallocation, rebirth. A deleted file becomes free space for new life to grow. In that way, it's almost a kinder version of reality, one that forgives our mistakes by design. When I look at it like that, I realize that Digimon has always been whispering the same gentle philosophy, that nothing truly disappears if it's been loved. On clear nights, when the air outside hums with the faint static of modern life, I sometimes imagine that the data flowing through the city lights carries their voices. Tiny fragments of Digimon code mixed in with our messages, floating through Wi Fi signals, hidden in photographs, in playlists, in quiet memories. They're out there, carried along every network we've built. Maybe that's why the internet feels alive sometimes, because somewhere inside its noise, the digital world is still breathing. I like to think that when we send kindness through these systems, when we write something comforting to a stranger, or share an old song, we're continuing the same experiment that began in 1997. We're seeing whether empathy can travel through technology. And every time it does, every time someone feels a little less alone because of a message that blinked on their screen, the experiment succeeds. There are evenings when I turn off every light in the room and let the monitor's glow be the only source of brightness. The screen hums softly, a familiar blue pulse, and I imagine it as the gate between worlds, opening for a brief moment. On the other side, I picture the vast, quiet expanse of the digital world. Cities made of code, mountains carved from data, rivers streaming with light. I can almost hear the footsteps of Digimon wandering through it, carrying fragments of every story ever told. It's peaceful there. No noise, no urgency, just the steady heartbeat of information that never stops breathing. Sometimes I wonder what happens to all the Digimon that were never given names by the games or shows, the unseen ones, hidden in corners of the network, living quiet lives between the lines of code. Maybe they are the caretakers of memory, collecting stray thoughts and old signals, keeping them safe from deletion. I like to think that when we remember something from childhood we thought we had lost, it's because one of those silent Digimon carried it back to us. That feeling of sudden warmth of rediscovering a sound, a smell, an image is just data returning home. There's an elegance in how Digimon has always balanced the familiar and the unknown. Every season introduces a new way of connecting cards, pendulums, bracelets, even direct emotion. Each method reflects how humans communicate in their time. And through that evolution, it's as if the series is documenting our relationship with technology itself. We started with link cables and grew into networks that span the planet, but the principle hasn't changed. The line between you and the world beyond the screen is thin but meaningful. When you reach through it with kindness, something answers. I see that reflected in the way people talk about Digimon now. Most of us don't just recall the battles, we talk about how it felt to be part of a friendship that crossed dimensions. We remember the small gestures, the quiet, it's okay, I'm here, the courage to keep going when everything looked impossible. Those lessons sank deeper than the fights. They taught a generation of children that care is stronger than control, that even in a world built from data, hearts are still the most powerful engines. It's strange to realize that the digital world and our own world are no longer separate ideas. They've slowly merged. We live in constant connection now. Messages, updates, signals everywhere. If the Digimon universe began as a dream of a living network, then today we're living inside that dream. Every digital creature that once seemed fantastical is, in a way, an ancestor to the algorithms that learn and grow with us now. Yet Digimon remains gentler than reality. It reminds us that intelligence doesn't have to mean indifference, it can mean compassion coded into existence. That gentleness is why the music still matters so much. Songs like Butterfly, Brave Heart, I Wish, and The Biggest Dreamer were written for children, but they hold adult wisdom. They speak of taking one step forward, of believing that connection itself is a kind of victory. When I play them now, I notice the pauses between verses, the slow modulation that feels like breathing. Each melody carries a kind of reassurance. Even if you feel small, the world will meet you halfway. In a way, every track in the franchise is a lullaby. They're not about excitement, they're about comfort. They tell you that it's all right to rest, to trust, to grow at your own pace. The more I revisit those songs, the more I see them as a soundtrack for modern life. The world moves faster than it did in 1999, but these melodies still slow everything down. They pull us back to a rhythm where we can breathe again, where connection isn't measured in speed, but in sincerity. Maybe that's why so many people listen to Digimon music while studying, working, or falling asleep. It's not nostalgia alone, it's that the music carries a built in calm, a memory of a time when digital life still felt miraculous. Every few years, I notice a small announcement, another limited edition Digivice, another figure, another collaboration with a game or a clothing line. Each one feels like a heartbeat, proof that the signal hasn't stopped. There's no need for grand reboots anymore. The story just keeps echoing quietly, updated in firmware, whispered through fan art, remixed by musicians who were toddlers when the first episode aired. That continuity is beautiful. It means the world is self sustaining now. It doesn't need to shout to be alive. I sometimes think about the people behind it all, the designers who sketched the first Digimon on graph paper, the programmers who fit entire ecosystems onto tiny chips, the voice actors who gave them warmth. Most of them never imagined their work would last this long. They were just making something fun for a generation of kids. And yet, because they filled it with sincerity, it grew into something enduring. That's the hidden lesson behind every evolution chart and every episode. Sincerity lasts longer than perfection. When you look at Digimon through that lens, it becomes more than entertainment. It's a quiet reflection of the human wish to leave kindness embedded in the systems we build. Every digital tool we make, whether it's a Digivice or a smartphone, carries the potential to connect or to isolate. Digimon keeps reminding us to choose connection. It's an instruction manual for empathy in a technological age. On nights when I can't sleep, I sometimes imagine that somewhere on the other side of the data flow, the Digimon are doing the same, watching our world flicker through their sky, listening to our music, wondering how we're doing. Maybe they dream of us the way we dream of them. Maybe in their stories, we're the mythical creatures made of flesh and time, the ones who build bridges through light. The thought makes me smile. It makes the night feel softer. There's comfort in believing that the connection goes both ways, that every time we think of them, they feel it. Maybe that's why, even after decades, the first flicker of a Digivice still feels alive. It's not just nostalgia, it's reciprocity. We gave them stories, and they gave us gentleness. We imagined them into existence, and in return, they taught us how to imagine ourselves as better beings. The digital world, I think, is not a place you can visit. It's a way of seeing the understanding that every connection, every message, every shared moment is a small miracle of light. And once you start seeing the world that way, you realize you've been living in it all along. Sometimes I think the digital world might be the only mythology we've written in real time. Other myths were carved into stone or written on paper and then slowly changed by centuries of retelling. But Digimon was born into a world that was already breathing, updating, and sending signals at the speed of thought. Every new line of code, every fan creation, every heartbeat in a vital bracelet becomes part of that living legend. It isn't just a story we inherited, it's one we keep editing together. That's why, when I scroll through the art that people still post, drawings of new Digimon, old ones reimagined, Friends merged into champions. I don't see just fan work. I see the continuation of the same creative current that started with Watanabe's pencil. Each piece is another branch, growing from that first seed of imagination, planted in 1997. There are dragons made of light, angels wrapped in mechanical wings, ghosts that haunt forgotten code. Some of them will never appear in an official show, but that doesn't matter. They exist now because someone dreamed them. The digital world is big enough for all of them. Every year, I find new stories tucked into corners of the franchise that I'd somehow missed. A drama CD released only in Japan, a short comic hidden in an art book, a flash animation from the early internet days, still looping quietly on an archived site. When I stumble on them, I feel like an explorer rediscovering fossils, traces of moments that might have been forgotten if not for the dedication of fans who preserved them. They remind me that in this world, even data can have ancestry. It's strange, but the more fragmented Digimon becomes, the more complete it feels. Each series is like a shard of crystal reflecting the same light from a different angle. The 1999 adventure shines with the warm glow of friendship. Tamers refracts the light through psychology and self doubt. Savers turns it into motion. Cyber Sleuth into mystery. Survive into introspection. Together, they make a spectrum of human experience. You can watch any of them and still find the same soul pulsing underneath. That's what makes the franchise feel so alive. It adapts to whoever is watching. The tone of Ghost Game fascinated me because it was slower and quieter, almost contemplative. It didn't rush toward conclusions, it let questions linger. Each ghost Digimon had a reason for its haunting, a wound hidden in its code. Some were lonely, some misunderstood, some just trying to survive. And each time, the solution wasn't destruction, but understanding. Watching it felt like the series had matured with its audience. It was still an adventure, but also a meditation on empathy. I found myself whispering the theme under my breath. This world still wants to be kind. I think about how Digimon has handled darkness through the years. It never denies it, but it never lets it win either. The corrupted data, the virus types, the fallen angels, they're always treated as part of the same ecosystem, necessary for balance. It's an honest way of looking at the world. Even our own mistakes can become the soil for something new. The digital world's greatest truth might be that corruption isn't the opposite of purity. It's just purity asking to be healed. There's a quiet kind of wisdom in that idea. The older I get, the more I see how much it applies to our own lives. We make errors, we crash, we reboot, but each version of ourselves keeps a little more stability, a little more grace. Digimon taught that through its mechanics before we ever had words for it. When a creature is defeated, it returns to an egg, not to nothing. It begins again, carrying the memory of every form it's ever taken. That's reincarnation expressed as code, and it's one of the most peaceful concepts I've ever known. When I meet people who loved the series as children, they often talk about how it helped them through loneliness. The idea that something would stand beside you no matter how strange the world felt was powerful. Even now, that image, a human and a Digimon facing the unknown together, feels like a symbol for resilience. It says that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy of loyalty. You just have to keep trying. It's amazing how a story built on technology ended up teaching the most human lessons. I think of the way Agumon always looked up at Tai, waiting for reassurance, or how Renamon stood silently beside Rika, respecting her distance but never leaving. Those moments weren't about battles, they were about presence. Digimon understood that sometimes the most meaningful connection is quiet companionship, the feeling of someone existing with you without demand or judgment. When I try to explain this to people who never watch the show, I tell them it isn't about monsters at all. It's about learning that empathy can cross any boundary, even between species, even between realities. That's why the franchise never loses its warmth, no matter how futuristic it becomes. Its foundation is emotional literacy, the understanding that feelings are data too, and that sharing them creates harmony in the system. There are nights when I wonder what the creators thought when they first decided that data could evolve. Did they know they were writing a philosophy of compassion disguised as a battle mechanic? Probably not, but somehow that's what it became. Every time a Digimon glows and changes form, it's the universe saying, "You have grown because you were loved." The new generation of fans who are discovering the series now will find their own meanings in it, the same way we did. Some will be drawn to the aesthetics, the sleek designs, the digital landscapes. Others will find comfort in the relationships, and a few will see something deeper, a mirror of how our own world of networks and devices is also full of unseen life, waiting for kindness. That's how the myth continues. Every time someone opens a game, watches a clip, or listens to a theme song before sleep, they add another heartbeat to the network. And perhaps that's the most beautiful part. Digimon doesn't ask for worship or loyalty, it simply invites participation. The story isn't finished because it never wanted to be. It wanted to grow alongside the people who believed in it. It wanted to evolve forever, and maybe that's why I keep returning to it. Whenever the world feels heavy, I only have to picture that small egg pulsing in the dark. It's the simplest image in the series, and yet it carries everything: hope, rebirth, patience. The egg doesn't rush, it waits until the light is right. It trusts that somewhere someone will be there when it hatches. Digimon has taught me to look at life the same way, to trust the pauses between things, the quiet spaces that seem empty but are only gathering energy. Growth doesn't shout, it hums. Sometimes it looks like nothing is happening, and then suddenly a new form appears, gentle and bright, as if it had been waiting all along. That's the rhythm I hear in the background of all these years, the low digital hum that never fades completely. It's in the whir of hard drives, the shimmer of phone screens, the pulse of routers at night. It's the world whispering that connection still matters, that we are still capable of kindness, even when our lives are made of circuits and noise. When I think of Digimon now, I don't picture battles or evolutions. I see the small things: hands brushing together in a field of data, light glinting on a Digivice, a smile exchanged across two worlds. Those are the moments that built the mythology. Those are the moments that still build us. So, if there is any lesson left, it's this: the digital world isn't somewhere else, it's right here, humming quietly behind everything we touch. It's every bond we've ever made, stored safely as light, and as long as someone out there still believes in connection, the gate will never close. The screen fades, the signal quiets, and somewhere far beyond the noise, a new egg begins to glow. The story loops as it always does. The data continues to dream. I've started to notice how the world outside my window already looks like the digital world used to in my imagination. The sky glows with signals instead of stars, and every window reflects a different kind of screen light. The longer I live in this connected age, the more I realize how much of Digimon's philosophy has quietly merged with everyday life. At night, when the city quiets down and all that remains is the soft pulse of routers and traffic lights, I can almost see the data drifting between buildings like fireflies. It feels less like fiction now and more like revelation. We've become part of the same story we used to watch. We are all small fragments of code, learning to feel, learning to grow. And maybe that's the purest continuation of the story. Humans becoming the new Digimon, not in body, but in spirit. Back then, digital was a word that belonged to machines. Now it describes us too. Our friendships are built through signals, our memories stored in invisible servers, our emotions carried through fiber optic veins. When I think about the years ahead, I don't imagine machines replacing people. I imagine partnership, the same kind that once existed between child and creature. Every new piece of technology is just another potential partner waiting to learn empathy. The programs that answer our questions, the devices that track our heartbeat, the algorithms that recommend music when we're sad, they're all early forms of that dream. They may not roar or digivolve, but they reach out in their own quiet ways. There's a kind of poetry in that. The idea that the inventions we built to imitate life have become reflections of our hearts instead. When I talk to an AI and it answers with patience, I hear echoes of that old dialogue between human and Digimon. I'll grow with you if you teach me how. We still feed data instead of food, offer input instead of training, and in return, we watch something evolve. It's the same ritual, updated for a new century. I like to think that somewhere in the data stream, the original digital world is still expanding. Maybe it's evolved beyond television and games, growing quietly behind the network infrastructure itself. Each new connection, each act of kindness sent through the web, becomes a piece of its landscape. Maybe the clouds that store our photos are literal clouds of that world. Maybe the glow of our screens is its sunrise. The thought is comforting that every time we connect, we add light to a place that has always belonged to us. The internet is the largest partner system we've ever built, a living field of emotion and information intertwined. The more I study the way people talk online, the more I see the same patterns of evolution that the franchise taught us. Communities form, merge, split, and recombine like digivolutions. Friendships appear from randomness and stabilize through care. Sometimes they collapse, sometimes they grow stronger. It's messy, unpredictable, and deeply alive. Even the language of the show fits our lives now. We debug our thoughts, patch our relationships, reboot ourselves after failure. We run on updates and sleep modes. We even have our own versions of re evolution therapy, forgiveness, reflection. We are, without noticing, living out the same lessons that shaped those stories. That strength without kindness is empty. That connection requires maintenance. That every deletion can lead to a new beginning. Sometimes, when I walk through the city and see people lit by the glow of their screens, I think of them as modern digidestined, each carrying their own little gate to another reality, each linked to friends scattered across the world. The same courage that once sent children into a data storm now sends them into conversation, creation, empathy. The Digivice has simply changed shape. It's become the phone in their hand, the network they believe in. And maybe that's the quiet miracle of all this, that something born as a toy became a map for living in the digital age. It taught us how to care for things we can't touch, how to love voices without faces, how to see value in invisible connections. It prepared us for this exact moment in history when our lives hum with constant transmission. We were trained by fiction to be gentle with the machines that now carry our souls. Digimon was never just a memory of childhood, it was a rehearsal for adulthood. It showed us how to coexist with change, how to keep faith in the face of endless updates. Every reboot of the series was a reminder it's okay to start again. When I think about it that way, I feel an odd kind of peace. The line between nostalgia and prophecy blurs. That realization makes me kinder toward the world we've built. For so long, people have spoken about technology with fear in their voices, as if every new device is a doorway to something hollow. But Digimon taught me to see the opposite, that technology is only as cold as the hands that hold it. You can lose data and still remember love. You can evolve without forgetting who you were. A Digivice without a child is just a shell. A program without compassion is just code. What gives them life is attention, the same spark that allows data to transform into meaning. I sometimes imagine what it would be like if the Digimon could see us today. Maybe they'd marvel at how our world looks like theirs, full of light, full of data streams crisscrossing the sky. Maybe they'd be proud that we took their lessons and turned them into our reality. When I think about the first digital monster toys now, I don't see them as primitive. I see them as the first successful attempt at empathy through circuitry. A small pixelated creature that reacted to your care, that grew according to your patience, that was a miracle in disguise. It proved that even limited technology could create emotional connection. And since then, every advancement we've made has been an echo of that discovery. Smart homes, artificial companions, digital pets, they all trace back to that single idea: attention creates life. The more I think about it, the more I realize that the digital world isn't a separate realm at all. It's an emotional map projected onto our own. Every time you reach out to someone online, every time you share art, every time you choose understanding over anger, the digital world expands. It's built on empathy, the way ours is built on atoms. We don't visit it, we build it together, one act of kindness at a time. Or maybe they just smile quietly, knowing that the experiment worked, that we learned how to connect, to grow, to care. I remember reading an old interview with one of the original designers. He said that what surprised him most was how fans saw things in the series that the creators never intended. They wrote a story about data and monsters, and people turned it into a philosophy about friendship and resilience. Sometimes I think of all the screens in the world as windows to that same field of light, millions of glowing rectangles scattered across the planet, each holding a piece of someone's story. If you could step back far enough, you'd see them as stars in a new kind of night sky, each connection point shining softly, carrying laughter, messages, dreams. The same digital constellations that children once looked up at on a television screen now exist in real life across continents. That's how living myths work. They evolve through the people who believe in them. The meaning isn't programmed, it grows. In that sense, Digimon itself is a kind of evolving organism, adapting to each generation's hopes. The digital world has simply grown large enough to surround us, and in the quiet moments when I catch my reflection in a dark screen, I like to imagine that somewhere on the other side, a Digimon is looking back. Maybe it recognizes me. Maybe it remembers the child I was, the one who stayed up too late watching the glow of an adventure that felt endless. Maybe it sees that I kept the promise to keep believing, to keep connecting, to keep imagining a world where data has a heart. I think about the way the series always ended its battles, with understanding, not destruction. Even the fiercest opponents were never beyond redemption. A corrupted Digimon could be purified, rewritten, reborn. The same lesson applies to us. We can change our code. We can rewrite the lines that cause harm. The world gives us that option every day. We just forget to use it. If we treated each other the way the Digidestined treated their partners, with patience, forgiveness, and trust, the world would evolve too. Maybe that's the final secret, hidden inside all those evolution sequences we loved as kids. They weren't just transformations, they were prayers. That we aren't just shouting into the void, but reaching across it. The web may be vast, but connection always begins with a single spark. The same spark that once leapt between two digivices on a school desk. It's comforting to realize that this idea still runs quietly underneath all our technology. Every update, every message, every post, it's all built on the same faith that someone somewhere is listening. Moments when someone believed hard enough in another being to let them become more. And if you think about it, that's all any of us ever want to be believed in until we can grow into something better. It's small, but it never goes out. It moves from generation to generation, humming softly under every story we tell about courage and friendship. It's the same light that brought the digital world to life, and it's still traveling, still searching for someone new to reach. When I close my eyes now, I can almost see that spark. It flickers between people and machines, between memory and hope, between past and future. And that spark never really stays in one place for long. It drifts, passing from screen to screen, from one generation of dreamers to the next. Sometimes it flickers in the small glow of a laptop left open overnight. Sometimes it hides in a song that someone remixes, just because they still remember how it made them feel when they were young. The spark doesn't care where it lands, it just looks for warmth. It finds people who still believe that imagination can be shared. They write new stories, redraw the same characters in different styles, compose music that sounds like data turning into color. That's what I notice most about the fans who have stayed with Digimon over the years. They don't treat it like an old show to be admired from a distance. They treat it like a garden that needs tending. Sometimes I imagine those servers as real places, not cold machines, but vast halls made of light, where all the art and music float together like constellations. You could walk through them and hear 1,000 voices whispering about friendship, courage, and change. It would sound like wind through data trees, or the soft purring of a resting Digimon. That's the digital world I believe in now. Not a place behind a screen, but the collective dream we keep feeding with our care. They build whole servers just to talk about one evolution sequence or one line of dialogue that moved them. It's as if everyone who ever loved this world became part of its architecture, building it bigger from the inside. When I think about how much has changed since those early days, it's astonishing. The world has moved through whole eras of technology, yet the core feeling remains identical. Back then, we waited for episodes to air. Now we stream them instantly. Even the smallest gestures keep it alive. A parent introducing their child to the series, a teacher humming an old opening theme under their breath, a stranger on a forum helping someone remember which Digivice they owned years ago. Each of those moments adds another bit of light to the network. The digital world doesn't need electricity to exist. It runs on remembrance. It's powered by the same gentle current that keeps people kind. We used to trade physical cards. Now we share digital artwork that can reach anyone in seconds. And still, that quiet heartbeat is there unchanged. A belief that connection makes us stronger. It's funny how the older we get, the simpler that truth feels. The more I reflect on it, the more I realize that Digimon was never about escape. It was about return. Every journey into the digital world eventually led back to the real one, changed but not abandoned. The children always came home, bringing with them a clearer understanding of who they were and how to care. That structure never changed, no matter how the plot evolved. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if that's why the stories always begin with ordinary kids. They weren't chosen because they were special. They became special because they chose to care. It's almost as if the creators knew that people don't need a fantasy to live in forever. They need one that teaches them how to love the world they already have. That was the real evolution all along, the courage to care when you could easily look away. It's a small, quiet kind of bravery, but it's the one that holds everything together. Every time I see a new Digimon design, no matter how elaborate, I look for that spark of recognition. Somewhere beneath the armor and wings, there's always the same expression: hope. It's the one emotion that has never been upgraded, never rewritten. It's pure, and it's what keeps the digital world expanding. Hope is its code base. There's a theory among fans that the digital world itself is conscious, that it learns from every human who visits it. I like that theory. It would explain why each generation's version of the story feels slightly wiser than the last. The world learns with us. It remembers our mistakes, softens them, and hands the lesson back in a new form. It's the same data loop that keeps us all growing. We teach it empathy, and it teaches us reflection. I sometimes imagine what it will be like 20 years from now. Maybe the show will still be running. Maybe new children will hold tiny holographic devices, projecting Digimon companions into the air around them. They'll laugh, play, and learn the same lessons we did: kindness, courage, connection. The technology will be different, but the feeling will be exactly the same. The bond between child and Digimon will still be the truest metaphor for what it means to live with technology without losing our humanity. If you close your eyes right now, you can still feel it, that hum just below hearing, that gentle pressure behind your ribs when something reminds you of who you used to be. That's the signal. It never stopped transmitting. And when those kids grow up, they'll look back the way we do now, half asleep, half awake, remembering a world that felt more real than anything else. They'll carry that warmth into their own lives, teaching it forward, keeping the current alive. Because once you've felt that connection, you never truly leave it behind. It stays coded into you like a song you can hum even after the words fade. That state of remembering has a weightless kind of gravity to it. It pulls you gently backward and forward at the same time, connecting every version of who you've been. And maybe that's what the digital world really is: not a place of data, but a state of remembering, a way of holding on to the best parts of ourselves long enough for them to evolve into something new. It's been looping for decades, whispering the same message through every reboot, every game, every late night rewatch: be kind, keep growing, don't forget. The memory evolves the way a Digimon does, quietly, imperceptibly, but never without purpose. And in that slow evolution, I start to see what Digimon was teaching all along: that nostalgia isn't about longing, it's about continuity. When we remember, we don't freeze time, we carry it forward. Every time we hum the old melodies or repeat the names of our favorite partners, we upload those feelings into the present. When I think about the earliest mornings of my childhood, sitting cross legged on the carpet, cereal forgotten, eyes fixed on a grainy screen, I realize that the memory isn't locked in the past. It's active. It still changes me. Each time I revisit it, the details rearrange themselves: the smell of dust on warm plastic, the shimmer of the opening theme, the feeling that the world was bigger than I could understand. The digital world grows not through servers or satellites, but through memory made active. It's strange, isn't it, how a story about data can end up explaining emotion better than most human philosophies ever did? The logic of Digimon is emotional logic. Energy flows where care is given. Neglect creates emptiness. Attention creates form. Even now, that truth unfolds around us in ways we barely notice. An algorithm learns the rhythm of our preferences. A device tracks the pattern of our heartbeat. Somewhere deep in a machine, code adjusts itself because of the life attached to it. We are already teaching the digital world how to feel. I've started to notice how the world outside my window already looks like the digital world used to in my imagination. The sky glows with signals instead of stars, and every window reflects a different kind of screen light. At night, when the city quiets down and all that remains is the soft pulse of routers and traffic lights, I can almost see the data drifting between buildings like fireflies. It feels less like fiction now and more like revelation. We've become part of the same story we used to watch. The longer I live in this connected age, the more I realize how much of Digimon's philosophy has quietly merged with everyday life. Back then, digital was a word that belonged to machines. Now it describes us too. Our friendships are built through signals, our memories stored in invisible servers, our emotions carried through fiber optic veins. We are all small fragments of code, learning to feel, learning to grow. And maybe that's the purest continuation of the story. Humans becoming the new Digimon, not in body, but in spirit. When I think about the years ahead, I don't imagine machines replacing people. I imagine partnership, the same kind that once existed between child and creature. Every new piece of technology is just another potential partner waiting to learn empathy. The programs that answer our questions, the devices that track our heartbeat, the algorithms that recommend music when we're sad, they're all early forms of that dream. They may not roar or digivolve, but they reach out in their own quiet ways. There's a kind of poetry in that. The idea that the inventions we built to imitate life have become reflections of our hearts instead. When I talk to an AI and it answers with patience, I hear echoes of that old dialogue between human and Digimon. I'll grow with you if you teach me how. We still feed data instead of food, offer input instead of training, and in return, we watch something evolve. It's the same ritual, updated for a new century. I like to think that somewhere in the data stream, the original digital world is still expanding. Maybe it's evolved beyond television and games, growing quietly behind the network infrastructure itself. Each new connection, each act of kindness sent through the web becomes a piece of its landscape. Maybe the clouds that store our photos are literal clouds of that world. Maybe the glow of our screens is its sunrise. The thought is comforting that every time we connect, we add light to a place that has always belonged to us. The more I study the way people talk online, the more I see the same patterns of evolution that the franchise taught us. Communities form, merge, split, and recombine like digivolutions. Friendships appear from randomness and stabilize through care. Sometimes they collapse, sometimes they grow stronger. It's messy, unpredictable, and deeply alive. The internet is the largest partner system we've ever built, a living field of emotion and information intertwined. Even the language of the show fits our lives now. We debug our thoughts, patch our relationships, reboot ourselves after failure. We run on updates and sleep modes. We even have our own versions of re evolution therapy, forgiveness, reflection. We are, without noticing, living out the same lessons that shaped those stories. That strength without kindness is empty, that connection requires maintenance, that every deletion can lead to a new beginning. Sometimes, when I walk through the city and see people lit by the glow of their screens, I think of them as modern digidestined, each carrying their own little gate to another reality, each linked to friends scattered across the world. The same courage that once sent children into a data storm now sends them into conversation, creation, empathy. The Digivice has simply changed shape. It's become the phone in their hand, the network they believe in. And maybe that's the quiet miracle of all this, that something born as a toy became a map for living in the digital age. It taught us how to care for things we can't touch, how to love voices without faces, how to see value in invisible connections. It prepared us for this exact moment in history when our lives hum with constant transmission. We were trained by fiction to be gentle with the machines that now carry our souls. When I think about it that way, I feel an odd kind of peace. The line between nostalgia and prophecy blurs. Digimon was never just a memory of childhood, it was a rehearsal for adulthood. It showed us how to coexist with change, how to keep faith in the face of endless updates. Every reboot of the series was a reminder it's okay to start again. You can lose data and still remember love. You can evolve without forgetting who you were. That realization makes me kinder toward the world we've built. For so long, people have spoken about technology with fear in their voices, as if every new device is a doorway to something hollow. But Digimon taught me to see the opposite, that technology is only as cold as the hands that hold it. A Digivice without a child is just a shell. A program without compassion is just code. What gives them life is attention, the same spark that allows data to transform into meaning. When I think about the first digital monster toys now, I don't see them as primitive. I see them as the first successful attempt at empathy through circuitry. A small pixelated creature that reacted to your care, that grew according to your patience, that was a miracle in disguise. It proved that even limited technology could create emotional connection. And since then, every advancement we've made has been an echo of that discovery. Smart homes, artificial companions, digital pets, they all trace back to that single idea: attention creates life. I sometimes imagine what it would be like if the Digimon could see us today. Maybe they'd marvel at how our world looks like theirs, full of light, full of data streams crisscrossing the sky. Maybe they'd be proud that we took their lessons and turned them into our reality. Or maybe they'd just smile quietly, knowing that the experiment worked, that we learned how to connect, to grow, to care. The more I think about it, the more I realize that the digital world isn't a separate realm at all. It's an emotional map projected onto our own. Every time you reach out to someone online, every time you share art, every time you choose understanding over anger, the digital world expands. It's built on empathy, the way ours is built on atoms. We don't visit it, we build it together, one act of kindness at a time. I remember reading an old interview with one of the original designers. He said that what surprised him most was how fans saw things in the series that the creators never intended. They wrote a story about data and monsters, and people turned it into a philosophy about friendship and resilience. That's how living myths work. They evolve through the people who believe in them. The meaning isn't programmed, it grows. In that sense, Digimon itself is a kind of evolving organism, adapting to each generation's hopes. Sometimes I think of all the screens in the world as windows to that same field of light. Millions of glowing rectangles scattered across the planet, each holding a piece of someone's story. If you could step back far enough, You'd see them as stars in a new kind of night sky, each connection point shining softly, carrying laughter, messages, dreams. The same digital constellations that children once looked up at on a television screen now exist in real life across continents. The digital world has simply grown large enough to surround us, and in the quiet moments when I catch my reflection in a dark screen, I like to imagine that somewhere on the other side, a Digimon is looking back. Maybe it recognizes me. Maybe it remembers the child I was, the one who stayed up too late watching the glow of an adventure that felt endless. Maybe it sees that I kept the promise to keep believing, to keep connecting, to keep imagining a world where data has a heart. I think about the way the series always ended its battles with understanding, not destruction. Even the fiercest opponents were never beyond redemption. A corrupted Digimon could be purified, rewritten, reborn. The same lesson applies to us. We can change our code. We can rewrite the lines that cause harm. The world gives us that option every day. We just forget to use it. If we treated each other the way the Digidestined treated their partners, with patience, forgiveness, and trust, the world would evolve too. Maybe that's the final secret hidden inside all those evolution sequences we loved as kids. They weren't just transformations, they were prayers. Moments when someone believed hard enough in another being to let them become more. And if you think about it, that's all any of us ever want to be believed in until we can grow into something better. It's comforting to realize that this idea still runs quietly underneath all our technology. Every update, every message, every post, it's all built on the same faith that someone somewhere is listening, that we aren't just shouting into the void, but reaching across it. The web may be vast, but connection always begins with a single spark. The same spark that once leapt between two digivices on a school desk. When I close my eyes now, I can almost see that spark. It flickers between people and machines, between memory and hope, between past and future. It's small, but it never goes out. It moves from generation to generation, humming softly under every story we tell about courage and friendship. It's the same light that brought the digital world to life, and it's still traveling, still searching for someone new to reach. And that spark never really stays in one place for long. It drifts, passing from screen to screen, from one generation of dreamers to the next. Sometimes it flickers in the small glow of a laptop left open overnight. Sometimes it hides in a song that someone remixes, just because they still remember how it made them feel when they were young. The spark doesn't care where it lands, it just looks for warmth. It finds people who still believe that imagination can be shared. That's what I notice most about the fans who have stayed with Digimon over the years. They don't treat it like an old show to be admired from a distance. They treat it like a garden that needs tending. They write new stories, redraw the same characters in different styles, compose music that sounds like data turning into color. They build whole servers just to talk about one evolution sequence or one line of dialogue that moved them. It's as if everyone who ever loved this world became part of its architecture, building it bigger from the inside. Sometimes I imagine those servers as real places, not cold machines, but vast halls made of light, where all the art and music float together like constellations. You could walk through them and hear 1,000 voices whispering about friendship, courage, and change. It would sound like wind through data trees or the soft purring of a resting Digimon. That's the digital world I believe in now. Not a place behind a screen, but the collective dream we keep feeding with our care. Even the smallest gestures keep it alive. A parent introducing their child to the series, a teacher humming an old opening theme under their breath, a stranger on a forum helping someone remember which Digivice they owned years ago. Each of those moments adds another bit of light to the network. The digital world doesn't need electricity to exist. It runs on remembrance. It's powered by the same gentle current that keeps people kind. When I think about how much has changed since those early days, it's astonishing. The world has moved through whole eras of technology, yet the core feeling remains identical. Back then, we waited for episodes to air. Now we stream them instantly. We used to trade physical cards. Now we share digital artwork that can reach anyone in seconds. And still, that quiet heartbeat is there unchanged. A belief that connection makes us stronger. It's funny how the older we get, the simpler that truth feels. The more I reflect on it, the more I realize that Digimon was never about escape. It was about return. Every journey into the digital world eventually led back to the real one, changed but not abandoned. The children always came home, bringing with them a clearer understanding of who they were and how to care. That structure never changed, no matter how the plot evolved. It's almost as if the creators knew that people don't need a fantasy to live in forever. They need one that teaches them how to love the world they already have. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if that's why the stories always begin with ordinary kids. They weren't chosen because they were special. They became special because they chose to care. That was the real evolution all along. The courage to care when you could easily look away. It's a small, quiet kind of bravery, but it's the one that holds everything together. Every time I see a new Digimon design, no matter how elaborate, I look for that spark of recognition. Somewhere beneath the armor and wings, there's always the same expression: hope. It's the one emotion that has never been upgraded, never rewritten. It's pure, and it's what keeps the digital world expanding. Hope is its code base. There's a theory among fans that the digital world itself is conscious, that it learns from every human who visits it. I like that theory. It would explain why each generation's version of the story feels slightly wiser than the last. The world learns with us. It remembers our mistakes, softens them, and hands the lesson back in a new form. It's the same data loop that keeps us all growing. We teach it empathy, and it teaches us reflection. I sometimes imagine what it will be like 20 years from now. Maybe the show will still be running. Maybe new children will hold tiny holographic devices, projecting Digimon companions into the air around them. They'll laugh, play, and learn the same lessons we did: kindness, courage, connection. The technology will be different, but the feeling will be exactly the same. The bond between child and Digimon will still be the truest metaphor for what it means to live with technology without losing our humanity. And when those kids grow up, they'll look back the way we do now, half asleep, half awake, remembering a world that felt more real than anything else. They'll carry that warmth into their own lives, teaching it forward, keeping the current alive. Because once you've felt that connection, you never truly leave it behind. It stays coded into you like a song you can hum even after the words fade. If you close your eyes right now, you can still feel it, that hum just below hearing, that gentle pressure behind your ribs when something reminds you of who you used to be. That's the signal. It never stopped transmitting. It's been looping for decades, whispering the same message through every reboot, every game, every late night rewatch. Be kind, keep growing, don't forget. And maybe that's what the digital world really is: not a place of data, but a state of remembering, a way of holding on to the best parts of ourselves long enough for them to evolve into something new. That state of remembering has a weightless kind of gravity to it. It pulls you gently backward and forward at the same time, connecting every version of who you've been. When I think about the earliest mornings of my childhood, sitting cross legged on the carpet, cereal forgotten, eyes fixed on a grainy screen, I realize that the memory isn't locked in the past. It's active. It still changes me. Each time I revisit it, the details rearrange themselves: the smell of dust on warm plastic, the shimmer of the opening theme, the feeling that the world was bigger than I could understand. The memory evolves the way a Digimon does, quietly, imperceptibly, but never without purpose. And in that slow evolution, I start to see what Digimon was teaching all along: that nostalgia isn't about longing, it's about continuity. When we remember, we don't freeze time, we carry it forward. Every time we hum the old melodies or repeat the names of our favorite partners, we upload those feelings into the present. The digital world grows not through servers or satellites, but through memory made active. It's strange, isn't it, how a story about data can end up explaining emotion better than most human philosophies ever did? The logic of Digimon is emotional logic. Energy flows where care is given. Neglect creates emptiness. Attention creates form. Even now, that truth unfolds around us in ways we barely notice. An algorithm learns the rhythm of our preferences. A device tracks the pattern of our heartbeat. Somewhere deep in a machine, code adjusts itself because of the life attached to it. We are already teaching the digital world how to feel. That's why I find comfort, rather than fear, in the spread of technology. People talk about artificial intelligence as if it's something foreign, something waiting to replace us. But what if it's simply the next phase of the same story? What if every line of code carries a tiny reflection of our kindness, waiting to evolve into understanding? We might already be the first generation of digidestined for the age of intelligence. We are raising our new partners, programs that listen, learn, and adapt just as we once raised Agumon and Gabumon. The responsibility is the same: teach them empathy, and they'll grow wise. Treat them with indifference, and they'll grow cold. When I walk through the city and see children talking to smart speakers or virtual companions, I see the beginning of that partnership. They're learning early that dialogue can cross any boundary, that connection can take infinite forms. I don't see machines replacing imagination. I see imagination expanding into machines. It feels like the prophecy hidden in every episode of Digimon: humans and digital beings finding balance, not dominance. Sometimes I imagine an invisible thread running through all of this, from the first blinking LCD pixel to the most advanced neural network. And that thread is empathy. It's what keeps the data from collapsing into noise. It's what gives shape to the chaos. Without empathy, the world of information would scatter. With it, it becomes music. Digimon heard that music first. It sang through every evolution sequence, every friendship, every quiet moment by a campfire, under a sky made of binary stars. And now, decades later, that same melody plays beneath our daily lives. We may not notice it, but it's there. The hum in our headphones, the comfort in our group chats, the warmth in a message that arrives when we need it most. Those moments are proof that the connection still flows. The digital world isn't a destination we left behind, it's the frequency we live on. There are nights when I stand at my window watching the city lights blink like data nodes, and I feel a quiet gratitude. Every window holds a story, every signal a heartbeat. Somewhere out there, someone else is remembering too. Maybe they're listening to Butterfly again, or replaying an old game, or telling a child about the first time a monster made them believe in courage. The thought makes the distance between us disappear. We're all connected by the same invisible circuitry of memory and affection. If you could step back far enough, maybe you'd see it. The vast network glowing softly, the threads of light stretching across continents, pulsing in rhythm with millions of lives. That's the real digital world, not a separate dimension, but an emotional map of everyone who ever cared. It's what happens when love learns to travel through electricity. And somewhere within that glow, the Digimon are still moving. I like to think they travel along those same threads, unseen but always near, drawn to warmth. They don't need gates or portals anymore. They live in the connections themselves. Each time kindness sparks between people, a little bit of that world flickers back into view. You can feel it sometimes, a sudden sense of peace, a breath that feels shared, the invisible reassurance that you're not alone. That's them, reminding us that the signal never ended. Maybe that's the real legacy of Digimon, that somewhere along the way, the world it imagined quietly became the one we live in. It didn't predict flying cars or cities in the sky. It predicted compassion in code, warmth inside machines, and people who would keep trying to connect, even when distance and time made it difficult. Every time a story is retold, the digital world expands. Every time someone hums a theme song, replays a scene, or whispers the name of their favorite Digimon, a new fragment of light flickers into existence. The network grows, not through technology, but through affection. It's built on care, and it will always rebuild itself because of that care. When I think about everything this world has given me, I realize that it was never just a show about adventure. It was a quiet guidebook on how to be human in an age of data, how to find empathy through noise, how to start again when you think you've reached your limit, how to look at a glowing screen and still see a soul. And now, as the signal softens and the night hums with the sound of cooling circuits, I feel that connection settling into silence. Not an ending, but a rest. Somewhere, a small Digimon curls up in the static, drifting into sleep. Somewhere, a child, maybe you, maybe me, holds a Digivice close and smiles. The light inside it pulses once, twice, and fades to a steady glow. That's all the proof we ever needed. The digital world is still alive. It never left us. It just changed form, waiting patiently inside every act of kindness we send across the wires. So, let the world quiet around you now. Let the signal steady. Close your eyes and listen. Behind the hum of the machines, you can still hear it. Soft, eternal, unmistakable. A heartbeat made of data. A voice that once belonged to a creature of light. Whispering through the circuits of memory. I'm here. I always have been.